Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Wow. Welcome to the MMA Fighting 2024 award show as we celebrate the best of the best in the world of mixed martial arts for the year that was. My name is Mike Heck. Thank you for joining us. And I got to tell you, as far as the actual awards and these categories go, this is a pretty exciting year. A lot of people won big, a lot of people lost big, and got in the trenches doing the darn thing in the cage or in the ring. And there were a plethora of memorable moments that took place in our sport in 2024. And today, we will reveal the nominees and the winners for the MMA Fighting Fighter of the Year, Knockout of the Year, Submission of the Year, as well as the Fight of the Year. So stay tuned for that. But like I said earlier, 2024 was an absolutely wild year. We got the saga that was the build to UFC 300, to what that event ended up becoming, to what it will be remembered as for the rest of MMA history. 2024 was also the year of Poatan, the MVP of the UFC, saving the day time and time again, delivering knockout after knockout. We had Conor McGregor's return scheduled, then taken away. We had the return of Khamzat Chimaev, the return of John Jones, who finally fought Stipe Miocic. We saw the UFC create something special at Sphere in September. We saw the UFC break gate records around North America with some pretty awful cards on paper. The emergence of teams like Fighting Nerds, the return to MMA of Francis Ngannou in the Professional Fighters League, the PFL's first year post-Bellator merger, leaving a lot to be desired, and much more. Plus, Tachi Palace still has not gotten their UFC event. Maybe that'll change in 2025. But folks, it's time to give away some hardware. We will run down the nominees for the awards. We will reveal the winner. And then I will be joined by a couple of my terrific colleagues over at MMAfighting.com to discuss how we got to where we got. So without further ado, let's give away our first award. And we're not messing around, ladies and gentlemen. We will begin with the 2024 Knockout of the Year. Take a look.
MMA Fighting's 2024 Knockout of the Year. Number 5. Alex Pereira over Jamal Hill, UFC 300. Number 4. Shara Bullet over Armen Petrosian, UFC 308. Number 3. Ilia Topuria versus Max Holloway, UFC 308. Number 2. Ilia Topuria over Alexander Volkanovski, UFC 298. And MMA Fighting's number 1 Knockout of the Year. Max Holloway over Justin Gaethje, UFC 300.
All right, everybody, there you go. Max Holloway, MMA Fighting's 2024 Knockout of the Year winner, and it was unanimous. Everybody on our voting panel had this knockout as the top KO of 2024, and I don't think anybody's really surprised by this, including the gentleman joining me to discuss the fallout of these awards. Of course, the esteemed Jed Bashu, Alexander K. Lee, and Casey Leiden. Does he have sleeves on? No, of course not. It's the Casey we all know and love. And Jed, let's begin with you, because there are moments in this sport that stick with us forever, and there are moments that define a year in this crazy sport. So when someone mentions the UFC in 2024, there's a lot of things that are going to pop into my mind, but I don't think anything's topping Max Holloway knocking out Justin Gaethje in the final seconds of their fight at UFC 300. Why was this such an easy choice for you?
We all knew in April that this was the KO of the year, because this is very possibly like the greatest knockout in UFC history. There are other contenders, right? And there is an argument to be made that this isn't the best KO of this year. I think it's a silly argument, but there is a not unreasonable argument to make, in part because it's subjective, and because while I don't agree with the somewhat insane assertion that like, this is just a punch, this is not like the most meaningful KO, right? Like this wasn't the changing of the guard. This was not, as some of these other knockouts on our list are like, oh, here is an all-time great going down for the first time ever. Here is a guy who's never been knocked out getting finished. It's not those. This is a dude getting knocked out, but context rules all of these things, right? Like at the end of the day, Michael Jordan's jump shot to win the game is just a jumper. But the fact that it comes with 3 seconds left and the hand push off, was it a push off? I don't know. Ice the ball game, ice the career. Like this context matters. And when we have here with Max Holloway and Justin Gaethje, this is iconic. There has never been a more iconic knockout than this. There are others that are in the same tier, the same vaunted stature, but this is a knockout you can tell your grandkids, oh, I was there for the phantom punch against Sonny Liston. Oh, I was there when Max Holloway pointed at the ground and iced Justin Gaethje in the not really the main event, but the people's main event after one of the best fights of the year on the biggest event of all time in mixed martial arts history. Like this is so iconic that any argument against it, while you can make them, are pretty unreasonable. Like it's pretty ridiculous to stand on ceremony and be like, nope, that's not the knockout we're going to talk about 20 years from now. Like this is the knockout of the year in just about every narrative sense and pretty much every other sense too.
AK, not only was the knockout memorable, but everybody who watched it reacted the exact same way. Everybody got out of their seats. Everybody screamed. I remember being in Las Vegas doing the watch party with Connor Burks and just losing our minds when this knockout happened. And as Jed said, and I'm sure you could attest to this one was going to be impossible to beat after you saw it, was it not?
First off, a big shout out to Pre and Perry for my clothing today. This is a indigenous-based clothing company, so I want to shout them out. Beautiful stuff, guys. Go order from them, Pre and Perry. This is why...
No free ads, AK. We don't give
right.
away free ads here. Casey, cut that.
That won't make it in. This knockout is... It's so corny. It's so cliche to say it, but like this is why we watch combat sports, man. It's like I think anyone who's listened to us before, I harp all the time. You know, belts are props and rankings are silly. I love rankings. We make rankings for MMA fighting are silly. Like you know all the politics, all the call outs like that. Like I know we get exhausted by it sometimes. Fans get exhausted by it. Nothing beats fight night. Nothing beats, you know, finally just getting to sit down and watch people do their thing and create moments. And like Jed was kind of saying, like this wasn't like the most meaningful knockout ever. It was at the end of a fight that Max Holloway was already winning. It was for the BMF title, which again, your mileage may vary on how much weight you put on this thing, but it is a cool little trinket. And yes, it was a meeting between, you know, two of probably the greatest action fighters of all time. But other than that, as if that's nothing, you know, there's no, it didn't feel like there was a lot on the line, though now we realize that vaulted Max back into another featherweight title shot. But in isolation, just when you were watching, I feel like you forgot everything else that was happening, right? That's not just the magic of combat sports. That's the magic of sports. That's why we escape into this world. It's like we just, for a moment, don't want to think about, you know, what trials and tribulations we're facing in our personal and professional lives and all that, and all the nitty gritty of the UFC. You know, we complain about the UFC all the time, but this promotion, when they can put two guys like this in there and create these moments and just let them cook, like you just let them cook, you just let them put on a show, you let it build up to this moment. And this is a moment that had been building for years, not just because of their reputations, but because we had seen Max invented the point down, right? He invented the end of fight point down. And when he first did it against Ricardo Lamas, it was super cool. It didn't end in like a knockout. And again, another situation, a fight that Max was already winning. But we loved it. You know, we loved it. And then so that was years before this. And then, you know, other people have done it and imitated it. It's never really led to this, you know, what the best possible thing that could happen, which is what happened at UFC 300, where yes, two guys go in, really throw down, some guy gets floored. It was magical, man. And as we can, you know, we'll talk about some other fights on the list, yes, that were more significant, that were more, you know, had more historical. We'll have maybe more historical, not more historical lasting value, just in a different way, in a more substantial way. But I just don't see how anyone could have watched this and been like, oh, that wasn't the best KO of the year up to that point, and that there will somehow someone will top this KO. We knew. I think in our thread on Slack, we said shut it down. Like shut it down. That's it. This is the best KO, the best moment. Maybe probably the best moment of Max Holloway's career, which is crazy because the guy's had, again, championship wins and other numerous highlights. But it was really, really, really magical. And that's just not a word I feel like we get to use enough these days when we're talking about MMA at the highest level. But there's no other thing to call this such a worthy winner of the knockout of the year. And I think for a lot of people, it'll be their favorite knockout of their entire lives until someone finds a way to top it, which is going to be tough.
I love how Max talks about this fight too, because he's like, I gave Gaethje one more chance and he would have given me that same opportunity, which is just so fun to hear a guy like that talk about it. Casey, what were you doing? Where were you sitting? Who were you with when this knockout occurred at UFC 300?
And that's why this knockout is so freaking legendary and obviously the best knockout of the year, maybe the best knockout ever, is because it is the fact that you asked that question. It is a type of knockout that you go, where were you when you saw this knockout? And I can't think of really very many things like that in the sport where you go, where were you? I was sitting at home. I had 6 teammates over. So everyone in there is a professional fighter or amateur fighter. And this is the first time I've ever actually recorded and yet even posted a reaction video. But you just had that feeling like something crazy is going to happen in this fight. I shot the video and like, oh my God, like check out my Instagram. I posted it. I'm just going back in my mind. Like we all went insane. I went insane for about 10 seconds. Just what we just saw. I mean, I've been working in this sport for almost 20 years. And the fact that I could see a knockout like that and it still just made me go just stupid excited and just out of my mind what I just witnessed. I mean, I don't need to repeat what everyone else said. We obviously know Gaethje's legendary, legendary power. Just highlight reel and Max Holloway and just the story UFC 300. We've all said that, but just this exceeded my just emotional cap I think I could ever achieve in this sport as a fan, as a media member, everything. It was just incredible.
Poor Zhang Weili
and the violence.
The poor Zhang Weili and Yan Xiaonan had to follow that. That was just, it's almost impossible to try to follow that, but they did their best. And then we got Alex Pereira booping Jamal Hill, which we may talk about in a second. But Jed, I don't know what's actually more impressive. The Holloway knockout or Ilia Topuria being tied for second in this knockout of the year voting. And I say that because he was tied with himself. His knockouts of Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski tied for second. And Jed, you had the Volkanovski knockout at UFC 298 ranked above the Max Holloway knockout at UFC 308. Why did you vote that way?
Yeah, so I love how we started this show, boys, because unanimous, we all agree. Let's laud and praise this wonderful knockout by Max Holloway, give him his flower and his crown of laurels and the BMF title. And now we can Festivus this shit, because I got a problem with some of you people. It is ludicrous to me that number 2 was not a unanimous knockout as well. It is very clearly the only real contender to challenge Max versus Gaethje for knockout of the year is and should be Ilia Topuria knocking out Alexander Volkanovski, because it is the most meaningful knockout of the year. It is the knockout that we will replay for years on end because it represents a changing of the guard, because it represents a significant momentum swing in the sport and in one of the iconic weight classes of the sport, because it is the first time Alexander Volkanovski has ever been defeated at this weight class, because up to and prior to getting knocked out, there was and still some people even make the argument, Volkanovski is the greatest featherweight of all time. And that argument quieted down a whole lot, as it tends to do once people start to lose, because Ilia Topuria killed him. This was not accumulation of damage that felled him after a number of punches. This was not, he got lucky and caught him. This was a dude who systematically broke Alexander Volkanovski, the second greatest featherweight of all time and one of the 10 greatest fighters of all time, broke him down, and ended him with authority. It is aesthetically beautiful to look at. It is technically brilliant what and how he accomplished it. And he did it against one of the 10 best dudes ever. There should be no question in anyone's mind that this is the second best knockout of the year. And y'all are crazy if you didn't put it, as some people on this very panel did not.
Yes,
I disagree.
I was with you.
I disagree.
I was with you, Jed. I was with you. I had this as my number 2. AK and Casey both had it the other way. So AK, I will start with you, and then Casey, you could jump in afterwards. Why did you have the Holloway knockout ranked above the Volkanovski knockout, my best friend?
Wait, Mike, you did not have this number 2.
You sure didn't.
Well, I had it ranked higher than
the Holloway one. Yes, yes,
the Holloway one.
Yeah, sure. We're talking about firsts. Holloway had never been knocked out before. I mean, that was crazy to see. We had said in the preview shows, like, Topuria is probably going to win, but it'll probably by a decision. None of us thought, we just, in theory, like, thought that Max Holloway could someday be KO'd, but we never thought we'd see it. We never thought we'd actually see it. So to see it was just completely surreal. Now, it wasn't for the title. It was defending the title, which is also a pretty big deal. And so, again, if we're talking about first, yes, being the first person to beat Volkanovski 145 obviously is crazy, considering Volkanovski, how many, like 24, 25 or something fights at featherweight. And you think about who he fought at featherweight, and to never lose that weight is freaking insane. But I am just as wowed by the Holloway first as I am by the Volkanovski first. If that makes any sense. It sucks when you do these awards because, when you're trying to compare things, something you have to start nitpicking away at one because, and again, I don't agree with what I'm about to say, but there are, if you remember when the Volkanovski knockout happened, there were quite a few people saying his chin is diminished now or something. His chin was diminished by the Makhachev KO. And that was a tough act to follow. Like, I do think if I were to pick which one's more impressive, I would pick the Topuria over Volkanovski over the Islam versus Volkanovski, but it's really close. It's really close. I think if you ask a lot of people, they'll say, "Oh, I totally put the head." Like if I pick my Volkanovski knockout, sorry, Alex, but that they would go with the Makhachev head kick. I mean, that was a crazy moment when it happened. So just based on that, because we had just seen Volkanovski get viciously KO'd, and it's apples and oranges, different weight class. I believe Volkanovski had enough time to recover from that knockout, if there is such a thing as being able to do it. Again, that knockout against Makhachev was so bad. And I think that for me is what notches it down just a little bit. But even just without taking away from it, I think just based on their own virtues, as I'm saying it now, I still can't believe someone put Holloway down with strikes. I can't believe it. Think about the names that Holloway had been there with. I got to run this down. Obviously, Volkanovski, Jose Aldo twice. And I know Jose Aldo wasn't like an insane knockout artist, in the UFC, but we know that man's resume. Gaethje, Yair, who else was in there? Anthony Pettis, Jeremy Stevens, Oliveira, young Oliveira, Cub Swanson. Max has been in there with some of the heaviest hitters of the last 15 years, and he never got knocked out. So to see it was just completely blew my mind. So I feel very comfortable putting it over the Volkanovski one. And again, the Volkanovski one was incredible. So which is I'm so glad it ended up tied. Like that worked out perfectly.
Casey, what say you?
Oh, we're gonna say, Jed?
I was going to say, I have one really big issue with it. The only reason it is in my top 5 is what AK said, because we have never seen it before, because it is a massively significant and meaningful KO. That is why it made my top 5. I ascribe a lot less to that. Like, it's still, you don't want to totally knock it on those terms, but like, no chin is uncrackable forever. Eventually you get got. We can still reward him for getting got, but this is not, it can't be done. Everyone can get knocked out eventually, and Max has been fighting. My big issue with this, it's not like a dope knockout. The only part of it is cool is that Max has never been knocked out. It is sort of a perfunctory TKO. It's not a TKO because it doesn't get follow-up shots, but Max isn't slumped against the cage like he is with Volk. He's not face-planted like Max did to Gaethje. Max is still conscious. He's just done. The fight does not need to go on. And so like the aesthetics just are not there for this to be the number 2. I think that is a huge knock on it. And if you don't even have that, like, I think it would be categorically insane to not have Topuria over Volk in your top 5. I think it's reasonable not to have Topuria over Max in your top 5, though I would disagree with that because it is not cool. It is just stunning and impressive, if that makes sense.
But I think there's a build up to the Max finish that, like, you're right. It doesn't have that final that great visual punch at the end. You know what I mean? That we had with some of the knockouts we just discussed. But I like the build up. Like when he saw that he hurt Max, I still didn't think he was gonna knock him out. I'm not gonna lie. I'm like, okay, he rocked him. We've seen Max like stung before, but he rocked him so bad. I was like, nah, like Max is gonna come back. Max is gonna come back. And then when Ilya just kept pouring it on, and eventually we get the TKO, not the straight up knockout. The buildup actually added to me, like the way it kind of unfolded. So we didn't get that big punch. It's true, we didn't get that big punchy moment. But for me, that's almost like a feature, not a bug. Seeing it unfold so the way it did was extra shocking. I think if he had gotten like just colded, that would have been probably more shocking, but in a different way. Just in a different way. But I think you're right. I do agree with the aesthetics of it. It doesn't match some of the other knockouts in this list. But yeah, I liked just getting locked in when I thought there was the possibility that it could happen, and then it did, and I didn't know what to think.
For me, it's really just about timing, and AK kind of said it. Volkanovski got knocked out bad 3 months before that. That's all. If that Islam knockout didn't happen, it would have easily been number 2. But because of the timing, it's just like when Ryan Hall submitted BJ Penn. If that happened in his BJ Penn's prime, it would have been the best submission ever. But it happened when it happened. It was just a submission. So that's the only reason why it's number. Well, that's why I have Holloway knockout.
It's tied for number 2, but you have it in front. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just saying,
it's just timing. It's just timing. That's all.
Yeah.
Future generations are going to go back to MMAfighting.com, great website. They're going to look at the 2024 Knockout of the Year rankings, and then they don't know the context. They're going to go. They're going to click they're going to click the videos and be like, one of these is obviously much, much cooler and better than the other.
Yeah, and they're going to go, whoa, Max Holloway, the future lightweight champion, got knocked out.
They're like,
yeah, buddy.
The thing is, though, it's not a hard stat to look up that Holloway had never been knocked out. Like, I don't think that moment is like that. I don't think that fact is obscured by like a lack of knowledge.
I have to look at our watch parties and stuff, like see what had a bigger reaction. Because for me, I had a much bigger reaction when I saw Holloway get knocked out. I was expecting Volkanovski to get knocked out. Oh yeah, by far. Because I think we all thought Topuria was going to win like a grueling decision. Holloway would just take 10,000 shots, but make it to the bell. But no, he got. It was just like I think what AK said. Like I couldn't believe what I was actually seeing. Like, oh my god, Holloway actually got finished. And to me, that was just that. That's what got it over the Volkanovski knockout.
That is probably the difference here because I picked Topuria to win by decision. I did not think he would knock him out, but I did think that it was possible. And like if you look at the betting odds, Topuria was a pretty sizable favorite over Holloway, whereas he was a slight underdog to Volkanovski. I was not surprised that he could knock out either, but the short, like the sudden violent finish to Volk was much more like, oh shit, that came out of nowhere, as opposed to frankly, to the other end of AK's point. Once he hurt him, I was not, oh, Max is coming back. I was like, oh, this is done. If he can hurt him, he can kill him. And it is a matter of time until the boom gets lowered. And ultimately it did.
Casey, I think, go ahead.
I'm taking full credit for the tie, by the way, because I didn't have the Holloway knockout in my top 5 at all. The Volk one was number 3. My number 2 was Alex Pereira booping Jamal Hill, because that was just incredibly memorable between the kick to the ding ding, the waving the referee off, Jamal throwing a strike, Pereira knocking him out, doing the meme thing afterwards. And basically, I don't condone this. And this wasn't Alex Pereira's, this is what he was. Alex Pereira wasn't trying to do this. This man ruined Jamal Hill's life all year. Alex Pereira ruined Jamal Hill's life. Look at what Jamal Hill has been since that knockout occurred. That just long-lasting damage and like PTSD for Jamal Hill. Like it's crazy to think about, but there are a lot of great knockouts throughout 2024. AK, what were you going to say?
Mike, you can't take all the credit for it being a tie because someone also had to leave off the the Topuria Volkanovski knockout for it to be a tie, and
oh my god, that's great!
Oh wow,
I mean, we can say it. We're all friends. I know he's not even here.
There's
to
some spicy ones from this person that you're about to mention.
I
didn't even realize that.
It is our own Damon Martin. It is our own Damon Martin, a man I trust for his MMA expertise. He has his opinion. He has his own opinion. He's allowed to have his own opinion. This is America. He is allowed to have his own opinion.
Of Alex Pereira's 3 knockouts, he has the worst one as his number 2 of the year.
Jed, save it because listen, wait till we get to submission of the year. We're gonna have some conversation. No. We're gonna have a conversation there too. Don't worry. Don't worry. We are not done. We are not done.
I'm circling this for our airing of grievances.
Yeah. There you go. Save it
I know that's promotional, but it's about to be a MMA fighting promotional airing.
Save it for the yes.
That could be an organizational Festivus as well. So UFC 300 well represented, UFC 308 well represented here. Shara Bullett's double spinning back fist knockout gets the number 4 spot. Just a sensational KO. And then the aforementioned Alex Pereira knockout of Jamal Hill at UFC 300 rounds out the top 5. Jed actually voted for all of the top 5. So well done, Jed. AK, you went off the board a little bit. Ming Shi's head kick as the 4th best knockout of the year at UFC Macau. Give that KO a little bit of shine. Why did this make your list?
Mike, I wasn't up at friggin' 4:30 in the morning or wherever watching UFC Macau to leave Shi Ming off the list, okay? I saw it live. I was in the moment with everyone else watching. I couldn't leave it off the list. That is a knockout, though, that speaks to Jed's point a little bit, though, that contextually, I feel like you need to know a lot about it. Just watching, it is pretty amazing. The savagery of it, of course, the stretcher job that poor Fang did after. So it is an amazing knockout on its own. But I think your average person, if they went back and watched that and watched like 9 other knockouts in our nominees, they'd be like, probably wouldn't see the top 5. It's only when you again, if you watched it live, you saw how long they waited. You had to wait after the knockout for the result to be read. It created a real moment. It was just the camera on Shi Ming the whole time, just looking concerned. This went for 3 straight minutes. I guess it depends what broadcast you're watching, but that's the feed I was getting. And so that added to how scary it was. And then
it's a big underdog too, right? She was a
huge underdog.
Heavy underdog, yeah.
Huge underdog. Great story. Talking about, she's a doctor.
Yeah.
So mild-mannered. Her parents don't even know she's a fighter. So that is a context knockout. That is one where yes, anyone could watch it and be wowed. But what makes it a top 5 knockout of the year is when you know the story and you know, again, everything that happened before and everything that's going to happen after. We'll see. It might even look better depending on how her career goes.
Other knockouts that got some votes, Vinicius Oliveira versus Bernardo Sopai. You got 3 people on the panel that voted for that knockout. We mentioned Pereira versus Prochazka from Damon. That was his number 2. I voted for Dustin Poirier versus Benoit Saint-Denis from UFC 299. That was my number 4. We mentioned what AK did. Souza versus Wild got a vote from our own Guilherme Cruz. Casey, you went with something very recent. Cub Swan. Oh no, that was Damon. Excuse me. Damon got Cub Swanson versus Billy Q.
Same card though.
You went with the same card though. Joel Alvarez knocking out. Is this an official knockout against Drakkar Klose? I think it's in the books as a knockout, but who knows? Talk about this.
Yeah, for my number, I put this as my number 3 knockout of the year, and take in mind this didn't even win performance of the night. By the way. It didn't even win a performance bonus by the UFC. But Joel Alvarez usually when I do my awards, my rankings, it's it has to have really big significance, changing the guard, like we like to say a lot. But this one I'm just picking because I freaking have never seen it before. It was a flying knee. Well, first of all, it was a couple of punches that knocked Drakkar Klose off balance, and a flying knee and knocked him out. Then Alvarez catches a unconscious Drakkar Klose, guillotines him, chokes him out, and he's unconscious, and he keeps punching him. I was just watching it right before we were on because I want to talk about it, and just so many things happened in about 3 seconds, and he got knocked out twice, choked out, everything. I don't know. Have you guys ever seen that? I've never seen that. Maybe like some random LFA prelim. I don't know. But like at this level, I've never seen anything like that. And because of that, because of just uniqueness and violence, for me, it made number 3.
Yeah, this was like, I do like the regional and like international knockout missed fists for MMA fighting, like gathering all those weird finishes and knockouts and moments. That's something you see in there like every few months, like in some random show.
Yeah, some
like,
random show. You don't see
in
this
like in the Czech Republic. Yeah. But yeah, it was, and also when you consider the quality of competition too, Drakkar Klose was like kind of our sleeper. Like we were all like, this guy just needs to get a top 10, top 15 opponent.
He's that one win away.
Yeah, he's won 4 straight. He just can't get a name. Is it a 9 out of 10 or 8 out of 9? Like a fantastic UFC record. And then he runs into a really, really tough guy in Joel Alvarez. And I don't know what you guys picked, like finish for Joel. I think I went close by decision. So I was way off. I should have known that I jinxed it there. And then when the finish happened, it was genuinely shocking and confusing, but like in a really fun way. Like, did he choke him out? Did he knee him? Was it the punches after that put him away? The official result was knockout, but it really could have gone in any number of directions.
It was a great knockout. There's some good ones on that card, and there's a lot of good ones this year. It's chock full of people just getting God. And
can I throw one shout out?
Please.
I need to throw a shout out here, and it's a shout out not just to one knockout, but to my boy, because I've never felt more seen than when the great Jose Young's taking over on BTL last week. He mentioned a fight that I fully had as my number 2 behind our unanimous number 1 knockout. Until I was looking at it, I was like, I am absolutely certain that AK will not allow me to do this. And so it will be getting its own separate award later at a different thing. But Eddie Hall knocking out the Nafati brothers, there is not a cooler knockout of the year, and there is not a knockout I have watched more than Eddie Hall going full Hulk in the Avengers, power bombing a nameless CGI enemy, and then sending him to the Shadow Realm with a right hand. It's the coolest thing I saw all year. It's one of the dopest knockouts you'll ever see. Go check it out on MMAfighting.com. It's a great website. And because we are governed by journalistic integrity and all these stupid things, we didn't get to give it its love and its rightful spot as number 2 because it deserves it.
Yeah, Jose did slip it in as his number 2, and I had to ask him to revise his list. But yes, that is the real KO.
Literally, I had it as my number 2, and before I clicked send to you, I was like, I don't want to. He will come back and not allow me to do this.
Wait,
so I didn't.
If Holloway and Gaethje went to decision, that would have been the number 1 knockout of the year.
That would have been,
yes.
Just checking.
Which it is
incredible.
If we're fighting number 1 knockout of the year.
I have not watched a knockout more. The only knockout I maybe have watched more in history at this point is the H-bomb on Bisping, because I've seen that thing a billion times. But like,
which was knockout of the year that year?
This week, I'm gonna rewatch Eddie Hall powerbomb a dude probably 20 times just then. It is incredibly cool.
If we were
20 years from now, people are gonna look at our rankings. They're gonna go like, how did these guys miss Eddie Hall?
Did they not see Eddie Hall?
We'll be ridiculed in 20 years.
If we were just doing combat sports knockout of the year, it's Eddie Hall in a runaway, and then number 2, Robel's to Spain's 4-second knockout of karate combat that just happened. So there you go. It would have been a hell of a list right there.
Yeah. Well, thank you, gentlemen. We're going to reconvene in a matter of moments because it's time for our second award of the show, the 2024 Submission of the Year. And this one was another almost unanimous first place win, but somebody on our panel didn't vote for it at all. Nowhere even in the top 5, which is very interesting. And we'll get to that in a moment. But without further ado, let us reveal the nominees and winner for the 2024 MMA Fighting Submission of the Year.
MMA Fighting's 2024 Submission of the Year. Number 5, Brian Ortega over Yair Rodriguez, UFC Fight Night, Moreno versus Royval 2. Number 4, Liz Carmouche over Kana Watanabe, PFL 4. Number 3, Dricus du Plessis over Israel Adesanya, UFC 305. Number 2, Islam Makhachev over Dustin Poirier, UFC 302. And MMA Fighting's number 1 submission of the year. Khamzat Chimaev over Robert Whittaker, UFC 308.
All right, there you have it. Khamzat Chimaev returns after a year away from competition. He returns to Abu Dhabi and just runs over Robert Whittaker at UFC 308, broke the man's teeth with the darn face crank. And this wasn't against Reese McKee or John Phillips. This is Robert freaking Whittaker he did this to. 6 out of 7 of us had Chimaev in the number 1 spot. But as I said earlier, there was one dissenter. One of our voters, he didn't just leave this out of the top spot. He left it off the ballot altogether. Take a look around the panel here. Who do you think it is? You are correct. It is E. Casey Leiden. Please show your work.
I feel bad, but this is one of those. It's one of those. It was I don't want to take anything away from Mr. Chimaev. He is a wonderful fighter, and it will be a heck of a title fight when he finally gets it. And he earned that title fight. But Robert Whittaker, he had a pre-existing injury, and Chimaev found it and took advantage of it. And while it was super cool and super awesome and that super gross, it was a pre-existing jaw injury that Whittaker had, and I had to take that away as far as my ranking. And if we had the top 6, it would have been number 6, but we only voted for 5. So that's the only reason why. But it was an awesome submission. It was super cool. And, Chimaev's awesome, and it was violent and gross, but all right, let me hear it.
Wow. Next you're going to tell me, Aljamain Sterling's title defense against TJ Dillashaw wasn't the knockout of the year that year, man. Casey, what are you trying to say?
Just
Rude.
Jed, is Casey wrong? Well, he's wrong, but why is
he's wrong. I mean, it's just like not having it at all is a bit strange. I don't hate his choice for number 1. I don't really like it being number 1, but there's some really cool things, and Casey will certainly get to speak about it. We'll talk about that because that is in our rankings as well. This is, I think, should be pretty clearly the number 1, which is why it was almost unanimous for us. Sure, Robert Whittaker had a pre-existing injury. None of us knew that. This was not an injury a soul knew about until after the fight. And Robert Whittaker goes on his podcast and says, I've had bad teeth for a while. And certainly not calling Robert Whittaker a liar, but why should we take that into account for us in general? Because he's had bad teeth in plenty of fights, and they haven't gotten shoved down his throat by the forearm of a dude he was fighting. Like, he's apparently been dealing with this for a decade, so for the entirety of his prime, and we are not holding any of his other losses or other people's victories over him against that. Why should we do it in this regard? And ultimately, this comes back to 2 major points. This was an incredible win in a fashion that we have never seen before against this opponent. We have seen Robert Whittaker beaten. We have seen Robert Whittaker dominated to some extent, but we have never seen him so effortlessly dominated. He got off no strikes, and I know that this is everybody's favorite statistic to throw out, but Khamzat, it was a fun, cute, interesting little anecdote when Khamzat Chimaev had 2 significant strikes landed against him in his entire UFC career as he is blowing through outmatched opposition. When he freaking what do they call it in Mortal Kombat when you 100% somebody? When you throw a perfect game, literally against one of the greatest middleweights of all time, one of the best fighters of this generation, and then win by breaking his face in an iconic moment and photograph. That's it. Submission is always kind of a weird one as far as the awards go. It has more opportunity for something unique or interesting to come out. But in this one, no, there's just not going to be a more memorable, more significant, more iconic submission than Khamzat Chimaev essentially locking up a title shot and, oh, by the way, breaking his face. It's the submission of the year.
AK, anything you want to add to that?
Jed, the word you were looking for was flawless victory.
Flawless.
I believe flawless
Well,
victory.
I didn't
Flawless
realize
victory.
on that
Sorry,
growing
it's
up.
all
So.
right. This for me, from a vibes and like how it made me feel inside standpoint, was the opposite of the Holloway KO. This didn't make me happy to see. I say this as a fan of both Whitaker and Chimaev. Didn't make me feel good inside. It was if Holloway's knockout was magical, this was ugly. This was gnarly. This was sickening. This was for the sickos of the world. All right, this was for the people who watch NASCAR to see car crashes. You know, these are people who, like, when they see a football player, their knee bend the wrong way, they're like, oh, you know, I got to replay that a few times. See that? That's who this submission was for, because I felt so uncomfortable when I saw the domination. I mean, was one thing. Just seeing Whitaker dominate that was rough. I felt the same way when DDP did it too. I was just like, man, hate to see this happen to see this happen to the Reaper. But once we very quickly realized the extent of what had happened, and then of course in the subsequent days, just more and more and more details, it made you really something. I think this is a feeling a lot of fans lose after watching so many fights. It really again made you feel that visceral impact of what it means to be in that cage with someone, and in actual combat. You know, we always say MMA is the closest to a real fight as you can get, which, you know, people may agree or not disagree. But in this instance, this is the kind of thing they're talking about. In an MMA fight, in a street fight, you know, in real life, someone could grab you and they could be so strong, they could permanently F up your entire mouthpiece. You know what I'm saying? Your whole mouth situation will be changed forever by a fight. I feel nauseous just thinking about it. And I mean that in the most loving way. Like, it is just a visual and a moment I'll never forget. And just another testament to the mystique of Chimaev, man. Like, we slag this guy a lot for inactivity and whatever other various dumb things he may do. But he's one of, I say, the three most must-watch fighters in the UFC every time he gets in there. And he proved that again with, I think, again, the best submission of 2024.
Rest of our list sees Casey's number one, Islam Makhachev, stopping Dustin Poirier at UFC 302. That finished number 2 overall for the total vote. Glad to see Dricus du Plessis' submission of Israel Adesanya get some shine, because I feel like that was left off a lot of lists that I had seen on social media, but it's MMAfighting.com. As Jed said, it's a great website. We got that one right. Middleweight champ finishes number 3. Liz Carmouche's Hail Mary armbar of Kana Watanabe. I'm glad this one made the list as well. Over in the Professional Fighters League, getting some representation. That finished 4th, while Brian Ortega's arm triangle choke of Yair Rodriguez at UFC Mexico City rounds out the top 5. All 3 of you gentlemen had votes for submissions outside of the top 5. So I wanted to give you each a chance to shine some light on those submissions. And AK, I'll begin with you. Vince Morales had a tough run in the UFC the first go, goes 3-5, no longer with the promotion, goes on the regional scene, goes 5-0, and now he is back in the UFC. But the victory that got him back there was your number 5 submission of the year. So tell us about it.
Yeah, this was described. I'm not a submission expert, so I remember people seeing when this happened, talking about it. Yes, he submits Hunter Azure, fellow sort of UFC veteran, in a fight that, I don't know, maybe the winner, it was like an unofficial tryout to get back at the UFC. Not that it was based on this one fight, like you said, Mike. Vince Morales had been doing really good work in the regional scene, hadn't lost since being released. But you always, you as a fighter, I think when you're on the regional scene, you don't know what performance it is that's going to put you over the top. You don't know the timing that's going to land you that right opportunity. But this was it. I mean, he showed out and he put on a Peruvian necktie. That's what I would have called it if I was just watching live. But as I saw it circling on social media, people were saying it was like a unique variation of it. I can't remember. I think he came up with a name for it. I regret not having it handy at the moment. But yeah, he broke it down. If you go to his Twitter, you can see Vince Morales sort of break down how he kind of figured out how to do this. I don't know if it's something he practiced, but it's just this great moment of at least what seemed like improvisation. Again, we're talking about Chimaev, winning a fight with this incredible squeeze. Sometimes just you're in there and I have to implore people to watch this finish of Vince Morales and Hunter Azure. And the moment presents itself, and I don't know if he did it consciously or if just his instincts kicked in, but he comes up with just this brilliant finish. And it's not about, this is one that's not about the stakes. it is about sort of the wow, like I don't know if I've seen that before, and there's always a place for I've never seen that before on the submission of the year list. So I was very happy to slot that in, and I just hope I hope more people check that submission out.
Jed, you went with UFC veteran turned PFL fighter, Braveheart Stevie Ray as your number 4 submission of the year. PFL Europe 3, well represented in the MMA Fighting year-end award rankings, and we'll discuss another big moment from that card coming up in a little bit. But why did Stevie Ray get your vote?
First, I do want to say Morales Azure was my number 6, so it just missed making my list because Peruvian neckties are dope, and so I got no issues with AK putting it there. This was pretty simple. 2 big reasons. One, I'm old enough to remember if you just did a twister, you probably won submission of the year, much less are hoping to scratch your way into the top 5. So the game done changed, but the context around this one was enough to pump it into the top 5 for me. It is Stevie Ray as the second one. It is his perhaps somewhat lovingly, perhaps jokingly known as the Scottish Twister. He famously hit one on Anthony Pettis a few years back. And so this is kind of a signature move of his, and it is done in Stevie Ray's first time fighting in Scotland in like several years, and a fight that is not certainly, but was billed to be his retirement fight. So just imagine, guys, you have a long, successful MMA career, never great, very good, a dude that certain people will remember. You certainly millions have watched you. You've had it, by most accounts, a good MMA career. It's your last fight in your home country before you hang up the gloves, and you hit your personal move, which is a sick-ass move, to close the whole damn show out. Like, that deserves all the love that I can give it, and all the love I can give it in this context is a spot as one of the 5 best submissions of the year.
Guilherme Cruz and Jose Youngs joined AK on the Vince Morales one. Jed, you were partnered with Damon Martin for the Stevie Ray one. Casey, you went off the board with 2 picks outside of the top 5. What are those, and why did they make your list?
I don't know how to say his name. Is it Koki? Do you know how to say it?
Clubber Koki. I call it Koki. I don't know if that's right.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm saying it right. But I'm going to talk about Koki Archuleta. That was at Ryzen earlier this year. I'm not sure what Ryzen card it was. But I'm a submission guy, and I am just scared of heel hooks, and especially heel hooks in MMA. And this was just a spectacular heel hook out of a wild scramble between two top 15, top 20 bantamweights in the world facing each other in Ryzen. If you watch the fight, it was a great, I think, a foot sweep that led to the takedown that Archuleta started. And then it was just a wild scramble. And from that scramble, Kyoke just basically launches out of it and just throws on a heel hook. And we just don't see, I just like how crazy looking it was. And it was a crazy scramble, high level technical skills from it, and just crazy amount of violence. And I'm just thinking about Archuleta, like how you're just in the fight, and then within half a second, you have to go, I have to tap out right now, otherwise my knee will explode. And I love heel hooks, and at this level, that's why I got my number 2.
And what was the other one?
Jandiroba, Amanda Lemos, just because high level and just nothing that might blow you away as far as like highlights, but just technically flawless. I think she went from a triangle had a triangle and then threw in an armbar. Just technically, just fundamentally sound submission, and that's I'm all for that. So, at a high level.
Yeah, shout out to all the submitters out there making noise. A lot of great subs in 2024. A lot of great rookies too in major promotions, but none were better than Carlos Praches. He was the runaway winner of the 2024 Rookie of the Year. 4-0, 4 finishes, 4 bonuses. Tough to draw it up better than that, especially when you add a main event stoppage win over Neil Magny at the historic, never to be forgotten UFC Vegas 100. And Jed, I wanted to make sure you got a little shine and gave some shine here. There's one other rookie you wanted to shout out as well. Please.
Well, there are 2, because I am actually of the opinion that we should count Dakota Ditcheva as a rookie. We don't really treat PFL Europe as like a major MMA org. I know it is part of PFL, and so it's a weird blurring of the lines. But like, we don't cover the PFL Europes the same way we cover PFL 1, 2 through 10. So like, I think she would have a case, but ultimately not what we decided. And so I think, given the structures we set this up, pretty obviously the second best rookie of the year is my boy Gian Silva. Like, shout out to Fighting Nerds. They would have 3 of the top 4, if not 3 of the top 3 rookies of the year if we extended this out. They have been on an unbelievable run this year. And while Carlos Prates deserves his flowers, certainly is the forerunner, not of the whole team, that's Kyle Braulio, but has been the dude to make the most noise this year because he got 4 fights in, got ranked. Gian Silva had 3 unbelievable performances, bumps up a weight class and kills Drew Dober on not all that long a notice. And if he had snuck a 4th in there and gotten a ranked opponent, maybe we're really having to nip and tuck and figure out which of the 2 between them deserves it. But just shout out to Fight Nerds, because those 2 dudes are awesome, and I think they're going to be in our lives for a very long time.
I think you're right. So there you go. More from these gentlemen in a minute, but let's head to the. Oh, please, Casey, please.
So because Prates was such a clear winner, but I thought there were other actually good nominees, and I want to just give a shout out to I want to say his name right, Zhang Ming Yang, the 205er who went 2-0 this year.
Big fella.
2 first-round knockouts. That guy knocked out my former teammate, Ozzy Diaz. Bummer for him, but that guy is, to me, I don't know if he's going to be a top 5, top 10 guy, but just a future all-action guy that UFC will have around for a while. And shout out to rookie, great rookie, rookie, my rookie of the year, and from my heart, Taco Padilla, who went 2-0 this year in the UFC with 2 first-round finishes. So I want to give him a shout out too.
Yes, shout out to them. Shout out to all of you. Shout out to you, gentlemen. But we get ahead to the final 2 awards. And if you follow social media, both of these awards appear to be the most contentious of the year. So we'll close the show with Fighter of the Year. But first, let's talk about the scraps that defined 2024 in our sport, the incredible battles of will that we saw in a cage, octagon, or ring, because it is time to award the 2024 Fight of the Year.
MMA Fighting's 2024 Fight of the Year. Number 5. Lewis McGrillen versus Dean Garnett, PFL Europe 3. Number 4. Islam Makhachev versus Dustin Poirier, UFC 302. Number 3. Dustin Poirier versus Benoit Saint-Denis, UFC 299. Number 2. Esteban Ripovic versus Daniel Zellhuber, UFC 306. And MMA Fighting's number 1 Fight of the Year. Max Holloway versus Justin Gaethje, UFC 300.
All right, more hardware for Max Blessed Holloway, and just another Fight of the Year plaque for Justin Gaethje. It's just absolutely insane how many times Justin Gaethje has been one half of this award. Holloway versus Gaethje at UFC 300 for the BMF title, wins Fight of the Year in a pretty close vote. This one may be met with some criticism, perhaps some controversy, as I've seen on social media. Number 2 is UFC 306, Noche UFC, Esteban Ribovic versus Daniel Zellhuber. Definitely deserves to be on this list. The round of the year was round 3 without question. Dustin Poirier gets 2 spots in the top 5, number 3 and number 4 for the fights against Islam Makhachev and Benoit Saint-Denis. And the absolutely wild bantamweight fight between Lewis McGrillen Evans and Dean Garnett at PFL Europe 3 gets the number 5 spot, because when you get 14 knockdowns total in a fight that doesn't go to the scorecards, That is absolutely insane. But let's go back to the winning fight, and let's go back to my pal Jed Meshoot, because Jed, as I said, this is a controversial one. The narrative surrounding this fight in the aftermath for knockout of the year, without question, it was knockout of the year. But for the fight of the year conversation is, not so much, because Max Holloway put on a masterclass and he beat the hell out of Justin Gaethje, and Justin Gaethje was just really tough. Not my words, but that's what I've seen a lot on here. And I was telling people on BTL, I think everyone needs to go back and rewatch this fight by taking all the emotion of the live watch out of it. You and I both had this at number one. So I ask you, why are we right?
Because it's the best fight of the year. I felt that way. The way that I've seen really smart people I very much respect think that this is not the correct call and that we are putting a hat on a hat. This is too much praise for this fight. I encourage everybody, like you said, go back and rewatch this, because I love me some Zellhuber Ribovic. Like, that is a great fight. That fight was a great round and a very, very, very good fight before then. Like, the Max Gaethje fight, I think we all just have a collective misremembering of it, because I had it. I've since rewatched that fight like 8 times. I had that fight 2-2 going into the final round. And yes, Max Holloway was winning that final round. If he doesn't knock him out, you know what that means? Still probably the best fight of the year, because in the championship round, Max Holloway put on a masterclass. This is the first time we saw Max Holloway get dropped, and Gaethje is battling back from getting his nose busted almost immediately in the fight. It is a dog fight, back and forth, a ripper of a battle for 24 minutes and 58 seconds or whatever, and then it ends in such an iconic fashion. And because the way it ends is so overpowering to the rest of it, and because Max was on his way to clearly winning the fight, right? I think people just misremember how good the action was for 25 minutes. And while like I said, I love Ribovic versus Zellhuber. I love some of the other fights, Poirier, BSD. And there are a couple of things that are really significant in its favor. One, as great as those fights were, this was 25 minutes. 25 minutes is more than 15. And so if you are similar or better, you just have more of it, and that is better. And two, again, like, this is iconic between two of the 5 greatest action fighters of all time. Like, it is, we will not regret putting this as number 1 in the future. This is a Hall of Fame worthy fight with a Hall of Fame worthy finish. And to me, the finish should not overpower or overshadow the fight. It should be the cherry on top of a beautiful and delicious and violent Sunday, which, frankly, Mike, is what we all said. Because how many times in the history of this sport have we been able to look at a fight and say, that's going to be fight of the year? Because I said that, you said that, we all said that, looking at 300. This is the presumptive fight of the year. And so many times in the history of this sport, we have not met the expectations we set. We have set the expectations too high, and they cannot live up to it. Not this time. They fucking did, and they did with also an incredible finish. So the totality of it, I feel very clearly, to me, this is the best fight of the year.
Guilherme Cruz and Jose Youngs also agreed with us. They had this as their number 1. Damon Martin had it at number 2. AK, you had this at number 4. Your number 1 was Islam Makhachev versus Dustin Poirier at UFC 302 for the lightweight title. How did you land there?
I loved that Makhachev Poirier fight right away. I might just be a sucker for Makhachev, because I think this was, I don't remember if this was unanimous, but it was our fight of the year when it happened that Makhachev and Volkanovski won. So I don't know. Maybe there is just something about the UFC lightweight champion, our number 1 pound for pound guy, that, like, I mean, based on those things, it just raises the stakes of, like, every fight he's in. I probably didn't give Dustin Poirier enough credit. You know, there's always that surprise factor, right? This happens in any sport where you're like, oh, I didn't think this person or this team was as good as or is going to perform that well, or they're going to get smoked. And then you watch, and then the way it unfolds, you're suddenly like, you're so impressed by how the underdog performed that it elevates both guys in a way, and it elevates the fight. So that probably happened here as well. I wanted to bring up an interesting scoring thing, because, so Jed, you were not alone in the Gaethje Holloway having it 2-2. One of the judges' scores was also 38-38. That was Judge Junichiro Kamijo. And similar with Makhachev and Poirier as well. Makhachev and Poirier, two of the judges had it for Makhachev going to the 5th round. And then one judge, Chris Lee, had it 38-38 Poirier. 38-38 draw going to the final round. So again, I don't know how they feel about the judging of Chris Lee and Kamijo typically, but I'm just saying officially you weren't like completely crazy. There were judges who like agreed that it was a close fight. And I think people are definitely remember Makhachev and Poirier as being closer than Gaethje and Holloway, whether it was or not. Again, probably for this reason that again it was more competitive than people expected, because this might have been Poirier's last hurrah. And this dude is a legend. I hope he continues to fight as a fan. If he just decides not to and says screw it, I mean, it sounds like he's going to, but if tomorrow he says no, I've made enough money, I've taken enough damage, I just want to spend the rest of my life with my family and other interests. Fantastic. So if this was his last hurrah, it was a great way to go out on, as high as you go without, of course, actually winning the fight and winning the title. And just like the Holloway Gaethje fight, I'm probably putting a lot of weight on the final sequence where Makhachev, maybe thinking he needed a finish or not, I'm not sure, but just pulls off that beautiful like improvised takedown. It gets Poirier's back and just it was so beautiful to watch. So it's the artistry of Makhachev, I guess, is always going to give him the nod. But I completely understand the Gaethje Holloway moment, or Holloway Gaethje, I should say. I don't begrudge it. So I just had it a little bit lower, probably for some of the reasons Jed said. As I'm looking back on it, maybe I didn't remember how many swings there were, and I didn't give Gaethje enough credit, for that one knockdown, which they didn't score a knockdown for some reason. But I'm very comfortable as well with Makhachev and Poirier. I just think beautifully competitive fight. Stakes are just a little bit higher. We're talking about lightweight title fight, best fighter in the world. And Poirier did great, but Makhachev was better.
There's a few things we can count on that are absolutely going to happen. Death, taxes, and Casey doing something real fun, weird, and against the norm
Casey
in a category like this.
Grid here.
And I gotta say, I may not agree with it, but I respect the heck out of it, because Casey, you went with Umar Nurmagomedov versus Corey Sandhagen at UFC Abu Dhabi in August as your number one. Please take the floor, because I have multiple questions here. One, why was this your number one? And the second question is, why was Holloway Gaethje not even on your list?
Okay, I'm gonna have to kind of talk my way through this, so feel free to jump in. I was like, I've been kind of dreading this show and this portion of it for a couple of days now, because I know I was gonna feel the wrath. But as far as like not having Gaethje, Holloway, or Makhachev Poirier in my top 5, really, I wanted to spread the wealth, essentially. He was RKO of the year, and I picked Makhachev Poirier as my sub of the year. So, for me, those 5th round finishes, in my mind, I had already decided who the winner was. From my initial viewing, I thought Holloway already was on his way to winning the fight, and I thought Islam was on his way to winning the fight. And they kind of just sealed the deal, basically, in the 5th rounds for me. And so I kind of gave him those awards already, and I wanted to a bit spread the wealth a little bit. And
I don't hate that. I don't hate that argument, by the way, Casey. Like I legitimately, there was a very big piece of me that considered not giving Gaethje Max as fight of the year, because it is going to get there was no doubt in my mind it was winning knockout. Mm-hmm. And so I don't hate that argument. It's a little gamesmanshipy, but I think that is reasonable.
I accept it. Yeah.
I think that's reasonable.
Yeah. And everything you guys said about those fights, you're absolutely 100% true. You're 100%. The fight, the Holloway fight wasn't a blowout. It was still competitive up until Holloway was winning, but it was still competitive up until the last 2 seconds. And Islam and Poirier was a competitive fight up until it was finished too. So but the reason I went with my fight of the year, Umar versus Sandhagen, is basically I just kind of picked what I like to watch. I'm just gonna it was my personal preference. I know this isn't the fight. You bring your friend over, they've never seen MMA. here, I'm actually not gonna show them Umar Nurmagomedov versus Corey Sandhagen. I will probably actually show them Max Holloway versus Justin Gaethje for just the first time viewer. But just me, like, is it 20 years in the sport? I just love high level fighting. That was 5 rounds, incredibly competitive, and I'm big on this for fight of the year. It had all the martial arts. It mixed the martial arts. So that's why I loved it, and that was why it was my number one. Even though my number one fight didn't make the top 5 on anyone else's voting.
That was
please.
That was one of my toughest cuts. I had that at the 5th spot for a long time, and then it was between that and Michael mentioned it later, but it was between that and Jan Figueiredo for me. So I maybe recency bias. I went with Jan and Figueiredo, but
in that fight, we kind of knew the winner going into the 5th round. It wasn't necessarily high drama, but there was just high skill level the entire 25 minutes, and maybe just it was the mood I was in that day. I wanted that fight to get recognized.
It's a beautiful fight.
That was my question for you, Casey. It was just like, I'm not actually surprised by your list, and I don't even hate it. We could quibble and disagree. I was in fact shocked that you went Corey and Umar 1, but didn't even have Jan Figgy listed, because those fights were very similar to me. Like they are speaking to the same thing of extremely high level, significant, important fights that appeal to the hardcore fan base and martial artists more maybe than the broader casuals. And so like I was shocked to see that didn't make your list, and that was just interesting. But I don't hate your list. The truth is, guys, there were a lot of really sick fights this year, man. A lot of really good contenders this year.
I actually, like, me taking out Rebecca Orbai. I hated taking that one out because that was like an incredible round, and and Zelhuber Ribovic kind of threw everything off, because I don't think we knew it was gonna be a good fight, but none of us expected that, and I think that's just kind of threw the whole year off in the sense of like that kind of one fight that just kind of snuck in there. But
dude, the first 4 months of the year, we were all like, "What's the best fight? Is it?
Hasn't happened yet.
Curtis, Brendan Allen 2? Like
it was
for a while. It was, and like that's a good fight, and it made somebody's list. But it's like there were almost 4 months where we're just like, nothing's jumping out, and then business picked up real quick.
Yeah,
Sean Strickland, Dricus Du Plessis did not even get a vote. And that was like a really good fight. Like not one vote for that one. And that was.
I'm actually kind of glad because that fight got. I was there live and I quite enjoyed it, but like that got inflated a little bit. Like in people's, I remember the videos were actually these two went to war, and I'm like the first 3 rounds were like the crowd was like asleep. Like honestly, the crowd was like. I was there.
Got inflated because we didn't have anything else to latch onto for so long.
Yeah, the first month of the year, people were so jazzed up. I was like, I was there. Really turned into a really great fight. But the first 2 rounds, the crowd was like out of it. I thought people did not remember this. The crowd was out of it.
Once Neil Magny beat Mike Malott, everything was kind of like we got the women's bantamweight title fight, and then we ended with that. But Casey had a bunch of fights on his list, not making our overall top 5. You also had the main event of UFC Vegas 98, Brennan Royval versus Tetsuya Taira. It's a great pick. Dan Hooker versus Mateusz Gamrot from UFC 305, and Chris Cyborg versus Larissa Pacheco from PFL. Battle of the Giants, all great fights. Jed and AK both went with Petr Yan versus Davis and Figueiredo. The UFC Macau main event, which was a terrific fight. It's one of my favorite fights of the year. Jed, why did this make your number 3 spot?
I just thought it was a sensational fight. So the way I think to some extent I agree with Casey about like thematically and how we do things. I thought Umar Sandhagen was awesome, but ultimately it was so close, and there were a lot of not moments because they were nullifying each other to not create. It was tense and it was competitive, but it was the kind of competitive where each guy is gaining an inch. Whereas Jan and Figgy, each guy was gaining several feet, and then they were moving back and forth. There were just bigger variations, bigger wavelengths. I thought that was it spoke to the same things, like I mentioned, high-level mixed martial arts, back and forth. A fight that I thought Figgy was going to be very outmatched in, and he really rose to the occasion, ultimately ended up losing, but really, really acquitted himself very well there, gave Piotr Jan a lot of problems. And so I don't really have an issue with almost any pick anyone has in their top 5. I'm not even sure if you asked me a month from now if my top 5 would be the same. But I remember watching that fight and thinking, this isn't a visceral, one of the best fights I've ever seen, unbelievable feeling like you get with Max versus Gaethje or Zelhubir Ribovic. But this was a, goddamn, I'm going to watch that fight like 12 times because what they did out there was awesome, and the swings were very real. And these are two guys at the peak of their powers, really battling it out to see who is the better fist fighter.
AK, you had this at number 5. How do we get here? Anything you want to add?
Yeah, well, about that fight and one of it, vintage Piotr Jan, man. Like this was backed up, I think, what a lot of us had said, where his run of poor results wasn't. It needs to be like analyzed more closely than just looking at a bunch of red on his ledger and going like, oh wow, he's fallen off. Like there was. It's not right to say extenuating circumstances. It's just like the people he fought were really good. And certain things just didn't go. Like, it's like a Marab matchup in there. Everyone looks bad against Marab, right? So, like, I think people looked at that fight and they're like, oh, well, Piotr Jan, like, how is he going to come back to title contention? But you forget how good this guy is when he's at his best and when he's not, doesn't have a nonstop cardio beast breathing down his neck for like 25 minutes, right? Or 50 minutes, however long their fight was. So I think a lot of us expected a bounce back performance from Piotr Jan. I believe he was the favorite going in, and just seeing the man deliver and take care of business was so beautiful. Like, I think he has a lot of good fights left in him. I think he's only like 32 or something. Like, he's one of those guys who people think he's old. Like, he's maybe old in fight years, but he's not old. So great fight. Happy to have him on the list. Are we sure Lewis McGrillen and Dean Garnett is not the best fight of the year? Are we sure? Like, is this because it was in the PFL that it loses points? I know a lot of people. I feel obviously a lot of people didn't see it. I think let's be straight. A lot of people just didn't see this fight. They didn't watch this fight. PFL did a good thing. I don't know if it was the week after, but soon after. The fight is free on YouTube, guys. There was no reason not to watch it. If you have not watched Lewis McGrillen and Dean Garnett, maybe the best, dumbest fight of the year, it's right there. It's right on YouTube. Look it up. Look it up and watch it. It is so exciting.
Twice. PFL and PFL Europe.
Yes, it's up there. You can't miss it if you're looking for it. It's very easy to find, and it's up there in its entirety. It is so good. It is so good. It is so wild. I understand it doesn't have near the stakes of like any of the other fights in our list, but if you were just talking of pure thrills, this might be the best fight of the year. Like, I if someone has this number 1 on their list, including all promotions, and this is number 1, I don't think you're crazy at all. It's that good. Go watch this fight.
Casey, not in Casey. I was going to go. Let me say this to you, AK. It doesn't have the stakes, so it's probably not number 1. I feel pretty confident, and this could be me being wrong. If you don't have it in your top 5, it's because you just didn't watch it. Like, this is what you asked for when you asked for fights. There are 14 knockdowns and like 12 submission attempts. It is not the highest level fighters competing. Doesn't really matter when you get action like this. All gas, no brakes, almost zero defense. Certainly no first level defense. It's all survival defense. Like 14, all I have to say, 14 knockdowns and like 8 submission attempts. It is unbelievable. And I honestly think that if you don't have it on your list, it's because you're just like, I'm not going to watch a PFL Europe thing. And you just didn't see it. Like, it should be number 5 on everybody's list because it's not, the names aren't significant and the fight isn't meaningful, but it should get the perfunctory shout out to this insane, weird thing that happened.
I had it number 2. I had it number 2, and I almost wanted to say F the world and put it number 1. That's how much I enjoyed that.
I would have respected that so much.
This fight kind of feels like the Eddie Hall knockout in the sense that
it's a different product.
It's a different product.
It's such a weird. Yeah, it's almost feel like it's the same sport as like a Makhachev Poirier or Gaethje and Holloway. Yeah, it's something else.
Honestly, AK, this fight feels like it's supposed to be the missed fist fight of the year.
Maybe.
But it just happened to be on a PFL branded thing.
Yeah.
So it's just like, if they could have just not put it in PFL, it would have absolutely been missed fist fight of the year. And instead it just gets to be top 5 because it's the silliest fight and it's so much fun.
Well, everyone
It is
should watch
very
out
fun.
for what do I say? McGrillen. Why I'm messing up his name now. McGrillen, because he just won their European tournament. 100K and pretty much punches the ticket, I think, if he wants to
Next
go
Ichiban.
fight. The only problem is PFL has never hosted, the North American version has never hosted a bantamweight tournament, but they got a bunch of guys there, especially from Europe and from MENA. So if they're going to introduce 135 next season, this is the time to do it. And you definitely bring this guy in because he is a potential star for them. It's so exciting.
Yes. Don Davis should have named this fight as his favorite fight. And I don't know
It's
if
right there.
I don't know if you saw this. Don Davis tweeted out, "What's your PFL fight of the year?" This one was not even listed. Francis and Henan Ferreira makes the list, but not this fight.
It wasn't listed.
Was it only
Hughes,
domestic?
Francis Ferreira, Cyborg Pacheco, Collard Pitbull.
So only domestic. Only
The
domestic fights. Only domestic fights, maybe. Not including Europe and MENA. Let's give Adana a break. Maybe, right? Yeah, no.
I can't. I just can't. This is the reason why this fight was not watched enough. But other great fights that got some votes include Brendan Allen versus Chris Curtis 2. It's a forgotten Apex classic from January.
It is a good
Alex Pereira versus Khalil Roundtree at UFC 307. Gian Silva versus Drew Dober. And then, as we mentioned earlier, the absolute war between Matusz Rebecki and Miktabek Oralbai. Just a lot of bangers in 2024. Thank you, gentlemen. We will go back to you in a moment. But now there's only...
Wait.
I just want to say
more. Okay.
2 important shout outs to just to put a bow on this. Justin Gaethje's 4th fight of the year for us. Unbelievable accomplishment. And nobody's talking about this. This is Max Holloway's 1st fight of the year. After everything Max Holloway has done, this will be the 1st fight of the year award he ever takes home, because 2019, his unbelievable rematch with Dustin Poirier happened to come 30 minutes before Israel Adesanya and Kelvin Gastelum put on one of the 5 best fights I've ever seen in my life. I was in the room for both fights. Max Holloway has somehow never won this, despite being one of the greatest action fighters of all time. And this is freaking Gaethje's 4th. So, well done, both dudes. 4th fight of the year is ludicrous.
Yeah, Dustin Poirier is always in this conversation. He had 2 fights on the top 5. Just absolutely insane.
We are living in the golden age of action fighters. It's the best.
Yes. Enjoy this while we have it. Guys, there's only one award left to decide, to reveal, and it has been a debate for the past 2 months. It's a 2-horse race for Fighter of the Year. So who gets the nod? Who are the other nominees that were part of this race? Check it out.
MMA Fighting's 2024 Fighter of the Year. Number 5, Alessandre Pantoja. Number 4, Joaquin Buckley. Number 3, Dricus du Plessis. Number 2, Alex Pereira. And MMA Fighting's number 1 Fighter of the Year, Ilia Topuria.
There you have it. The 2024 MMA Fighting Fighter of the Year is the UFC featherweight champion, Ilia Topuria. What a back-to-back this man had in 2024, knocking out 2 of the greatest featherweights in the history of the sport in consecutive fights, brutally knocking out Alexander Volkanovski to win the belt at UFC 298 in February, and then becomes the first fighter to knock out Max Holloway at UFC 308 in October. In his first title defense, he gets 5 Actually, he get 5 of the 7 first place votes. UFC light heavyweight champion Alex Pereira finishes second after knocking out Jamal Hill, Yuri Prochazka, and Khalil Roundtree. Poatan receives 2 first place votes. UFC middleweight champ Dricus du Plessis finishes third, finishing fourth. Joaquin freaking Buckley. What a turnaround that man had perceptually. 4-0 in 2024. Worst call out in the history of the UFC. And the man just turns it around. And then in number 5 is the UFC flyweight champion, Alexandre Pantoja, after 2 successful title defenses. Jed, you are shaking your head. So I'm just going to let you go. Why are you shaking your head?
Buckley should not be in the fight of the year. That's
what?
Buckley is the comeback fighter of the year. He's coming back from his own failings, but we can get to that later. We're really quibbling at the bottom of the top 5, but I think my number 5 really got widely disrespected this year.
Wow.
And maybe he's brought a little bit of that on himself, a la Mr. Buckley. But if you're just looking at performances the year, I feel like my number 5 should easily be in front of Buckley. But that's a future problem for us to discuss, because we have to discuss the great debate that should not exist at all.
Well, let's discuss it, because for me, it all came down to, because you look at this in 2 ways, Jed. You prefer quantity, and that was like the big argument against it, and all the hate DMs that I'm a moron and I don't know what I'm talking about, saying Ilia Topuria is fighter of the year. Well, he only won 2 fights, but Pereira won 3. Or you prefer quality. And while Pereira had some great finishes and performances, the quality of Ilia Topuria's wins, frankly, is unmatched in 2024, in my opinion. And frankly, is matched very rarely over like the history of the UFC. I assume you agree with that, which is why you had Ilia Topuria at number 1.
Of course. I said heading into the fight that the winner of Ilia Topuria, Max Holloway, was fighter of the year in my mind, and there were no questions asked. Because if Max had won, he has the 300 Gaethje, which we have already given all the awards to and talked about plenty, and then he would have reclaimed the featherweight title. It would have been nearly an unprecedented achievement. A fighter has never reclaimed, only once in history has a fighter reclaimed a title. It was like 5.5 years since they previously held it. The lone time that has ever happened was the great Cookie Monster versus Rose Namajunas fight that we all would like to block from our memory. Like, that would have clearly done it, but instead, Ilia Topuria puts quite possibly the 2 greatest greatest back-to-back wins ever. There's an argument. I'm not saying it is true, but there are not many times in history where someone has won 2 back-to-back fights that are as significant, because I personally have Volkanovski in the top 10 greatest of all time fighters, and I have Max Holloway in the top 15. And while I don't think either are probably in their peak, they both are very close to their primes, and to not just beat them, but to dominate them in the fashion that he did, as a guy who was probably not in his prime yet either. A changing of the guard moment, a significant moment, unbelievable wins and performances. Those are very clearly better than Alex Pereira's wins. Alex Pereira beat, and this is not necessarily his fault, but light heavyweight is trash. And so he beat 2 people who aren't probably that good, and he beat a dude he's already beaten and appears to be a stylistic softball matchup for him. It's not to take things away from Pereira. Pereira is obviously my number 2, and I think there is an argument for Pereira, but not in the terms that most of us are looking at this lens. Mike, I thought you summed it up best on BTL this past week. Not Michelle Pereira at all. Alex Pereira is the MVP. There's a narrative component to it. He did the most, stepping in on short notice. But if you're just looking for who is the fighter of the year, who did the best stuff this year, I think it's Ilia Topuria in a runaway.
AK, you went the opposite direction. You went with Alex Poatan Pereira as your fighter of the year. Why is Jed wrong?
Oh, I don't know if he's wrong, because he brings up a point that kind of explains my pick. I'm all in on the narrative. I'm all in on the narrative of Alex Pereira saved the UFC in 2024. Alex Pereira is the biggest star right now. Again, these aren't things that should, that are necessarily like make his performances or the quality of his wins more impressive than Topuria, but perception is everything, right? And I think when we look back on 2024, it is going to be viewed as the year of Pereira. That's probably not fair to Topuria. It's probably not fair to Volkanovski and Holloway because, yes, if you said someone would beat those two guys, knock out those two guys in the same calendar year, you couldn't imagine someone having a better year. But there was just the way that Pereira was marketed, the way he marketed himself. I use the word a lot, I know, but the mystique this guy's able to maintain. All of his fights were memorable too. And I'm not saying Topuria's weren't. I'm saying like this is what helps Pereira is that clearly the competition wasn't as good, but each one is memorable in its own way. The Jamal Hill, the let me cook, bro, telling the referee to back off, and also just beating up Jamal Hill, who people don't like. The Yuri Prochazka rematch, that's obviously the most dangerous of the three fights, but he won that one. And then the stare after, and like Yuri just stumbling. Yuri helped a lot too, by the way, with the build for that fight, with the whole like Alex Pereira is dealing with evil spirits. Like I don't like that. That
He's cheating.
A lot. He's cheating. He's using demonry. That was crazy, and that added so much to it. Like he owes Prochazka a favor for building it up like that. And Roundtree, I think a lot of us thought in the know thought it was going to be competitive, and it turned out that way. It turned into a great fight. People might want to hold this against Pereira that he didn't just like blow out Roundtree, but I never thought that was going to happen. I always thought, I kind of believed in the glory killer thing. I thought that Roundtree is like a tricky stand-up matchup for anybody. And we got sort of one of the underrated, like, great fights of the year. It didn't make any of our lists. I don't think it got a vote even, but it was a very, very good title fight and a very memorable fight. So, and ended with, again, another brutal, bloody, just nasty finish. Just the aftermath, all the interviews that Khalil did after. God bless him. I don't know why he put us on in front of a camera, but he had a microphone in front of his face. The gauze, just horrifying. So all of that added up to what is the year Pereira. Again, based on quality of competition, it's not close. Literally, the two greatest featherweights of all time are on Topuria's resume by KO in the same year. But
I'm going to murder you.
Yeah. but
I'm going to come to Canada.
Oh God, I'm so sorry. Sorry, that was
How
John
dare
Anik.
you.
Sorry, that was the John Anik in me. Sorry. The two consensus greatest featherweights of all time, Jed, is what I meant to say. I'm sorry. I forgot. But yes, two of the top four greatest featherweights of all time. Let me clarify. I just mentioned Aldo earlier too. But when people remember this year, it is the year of Pereira. So I bought into that fully, and I think that's a pretty strong justification for him to be number one.
Casey, anything you want to add for Team Topuria here?
Oh, it was basically a two horse race, and I agree everything with what Jed said about Topuria. And if we had an employee of the year, of course it goes to Alex Pereira because he made the UFC so much freaking money. So employee of the year, independent contractor of the year goes to Alex Pereira. But fighter of the year, big difference, Ilia Topuria.
Let's talk about some of the off-the-board things that happened. Again, boring Mike Heck over here. All 5 of my votes were in the top 5. Dricus du Plessis gets 5 third-place votes, and then 2 voters didn't vote for him at all. And that includes, you guessed it, E. Casey Leiden, who gave his third-place vote to PFL rising star Dakota Ditcheva, who was 4-0, 4 finishes, a PFL World Championship title after stopping Tyler Santos. Yes, AK?
Before Casey goes, because I'm with it, I also voted for Dakota Ditcheva.
Yes.
Before Casey goes, 2 things. One, I meant to say this before. If you had told us that there would be like that, obviously our list is always going to be a lot of UFC champions, that the one guy in the top 5 that wasn't a UFC champion, if you told us at the beginning of the year, it would be Joaquin Buckley. It would have sounded completely insane. So I think that's where Jet's coming from. Like he shouldn't even be in there. It does look wrong. I'm happy with it because I voted for him as my number 5 guy. I'm happy he made it, but it does look very crazy. See Topuria, Pereira, du Plessis, Pantoja, and Joaquin Buckley. That's wild.
One of these guys is not like the others.
yet. Ditcheva, I think one reason I didn't feel like we need to give her flowers in Rookie of the Year was I thought she'd get more support for Fighter of the Year. I actually thought she was going to crack our top 5. So Casey and I both had her in there. But that was it. It is just Casey and I that voted for Ditcheva. I get it. PFL competition, we sort of like, it's maybe in general a notch below UFC, but there's no question that Tyler Santos win, right? Like that was such a validation of what we thought we had with Ditcheva, and it actually played out in practice. So I was very happy to have her on the list, Casey. I don't know about you.
Yeah. So to me, to sell you on Ditcheva, I think 4-0, 4 first-round knockouts, and just what she did to Santos was unreal. No one's ever done it before. And I want to give her a lot of credit what she did to Jenna Bishop, too. Jenna Bishop lost a razor-close decision to Tyler Santos. She's also, I think, very good, too. Just doesn't have the name recognition. She destroyed Jenna Bishop. And, yeah, I just think Ditcheva was my number 3. I don't know.
For clarity's
I don't
sake,
mind it.
there were 3 first-round knockouts.
Oh, 3, sorry.
She finished Tyler Santos in the second round.
Second round, okay.
Want to make sure we're on the board correctly there.
4 violent finishes. Yeah, and And
I had her
absolutely.
Nah, go ahead.
I
had her number 8. I had her behind the 5 there. I had her behind Diego Lopez and Carlos Praches as well. Because, I mean, look, the one thing that didn't get me there was the first 2 wins did just nothing for me. Lisa Malden she was like a minus 3,000 favorite. She was like a minus 3,500 favorite against Chelsea Hackett. We knew what the PFL was doing. They gave her the easiest possible road. And they basically have admitted as such. Jenna Bishop was impressive, but it wasn't the one that got me there. After seeing the Santos one, it got her on the list for me. So yeah, it was a great year for her. 2025 is going to be super interesting for her. But yeah, she should be probably in everybody's top 10. Do you agree with that, Jed?
I do. I don't even have an issue if you have her in the top 5. Okay, incorrect. I have some issue. I think my top 5 in this one to me, feels like it should be ironclad that I got the 5 right. Obviously subjective, but like in the other categories, if you disagree with me, I much less. I think the 5 that I have is correct. The thing I want to say is about Ditcheva specifically, and then I want to speak about Casey. This was the time I most thought, should we do a female fighter of the year award instead? Because I do feel like Ditcheva clearly would have been the runaway favorite for Women's Fighter of the Year. We don't do that, and there are good reasons for that, but I really wanted her to get flowers in a way that I just don't think she is going to this year because of how our awards are structured. And then to Casey, I just want to say, this is the most on-brand you've ever been. Because to not have Dricus du Plessis get an award, we talked on a ranking show earlier where you were just like, yes, objectively beating Sean Strickland and Israel Adesanya is very good. I still think he is bad at fighting, and so I do not respect him. And it's just like, I think pretty clearly, and most of us seem to agree based on the voting, 5 or 6, whatever, third place votes. This dude did the most impressive in-cage stuff of the year. And Casey's just like, nope, he looks weird. I don't support it, so it's the best.
That is some ugly fighting.
Yeah. Sure, he's winning, but at what cost? He looks so gross doing it.
Can I dispute your ironclad list briefly?
You can.
You got Merab at number 5?
I have Merab. So my 5 is the 3 that we've discussed. I have my number 6 is Alejandra Pantoja. My number 5 is Merab, and I feel really, really good about that list.
Here's my case against Merab. Henry Cejudo sucks, so that is nothing. That means about as much as Chelsea Hackett to me, frankly. I put Cejudo on that level. I put him on that level. The Chelsea Hackett and the Lisa Malden. If I'm being perfectly honest, yeah,
that's a take to have.
And O'Malley, 48-47 O'Malley. So there you go. So like I can't have him on the list. There's just no place for him.
Those, I guess, are arguments, but so we're clear. The thing I do have an issue. I was the only person to put Merab in the top 5, and I get it. He has been awful as a champion. Everything he has said, he has PR'd this terribly. What he did in cage, which is the primary of this year, is he wailed. I mean, not wailed because not Merab. He dominated Henry Cejudo in a way that basically no one ever has. He out-wrestled the Olympic gold medalist, just put the wood to Henry Cejudo, a fighter who is good, even if he maybe sucks. And then he, on mini cards, 49-46, the current champion, and narratively, AK, as a man who supports the narrative of Alex Pereira, He finally did it. He finally got the belt that people thought for years he deserved, that he did not get to have a chance at because his friend was. Yes, he has been awful as a champion. You will not find a human being who will stand on a taller soapbox than I to rail against Merab and his PR management. But his in-cage performances, I do not think there are 5 people with better in-cage results than Merab this year.
Well, others disagreed. Diego Lopez.
Everybody did, because I am the only one who voted for him.
Yes, Diego Lopez got some votes. Carlos Praches got some votes. Bilal Muhammad got a vote. That's the head scratcher for me. Like, he did win the belt, but one fight, one win. It's just kind of a tougher sell, but it's not my vote. But yeah, there are a lot of great nominees for Fighter of the Year. It's never a bad thing to have too many names in play. This is obviously a 2-horse race, but it's always nice to shine some light on some others. But before we wrap up this category and we wrap up the program, this is going to be an interesting award heading into 2025 because of what I just mentioned. There's so many names on this list that performed well but didn't get over the hump in 2024 because of Topuria and Pereira. So I want all of us to give a quick prediction for Fighter of the Year in 2025. So, AK, I want to start with you. Who's your pick for 2025 Fighter of the Year if you had to take a guess right now?
I decided to go big. I didn't want to be boring and say Pereira or Topuria, who could both have big years ahead of them. No question. John Jones or Tom Aspinall, maybe if they end up fighting each other, who knows? They could make waves. We could see John Jones become Fighter of the Year again. Imagine that. I almost went with like Tatiana Suarez. I was like, maybe she makes it to the Zhang fight. She beats Zhang, defends her title once. But I said, if I'm going to swing big like that with Tatiana, there's an even bigger like target out there who is known for not necessarily being the most active fighter, someone who everyone thinks is going to win a title someday, if not more than one. A guy who, when he debuted in the UFC, guys, almost, I think, won Fighter of the Year that year. Like, he was that impressive. Of course, I ain't talking about our Submission of the Year winner, one Mr. Khamzat Chimaev. Now, this banks on Khamzat fighting at least twice. I don't think there's one win. Like, I think if you like this bizarre, I think it's a fake rumor, but let's say by some sort of bizarre chance he did go up and fight Alex Pereira next. I think if he just beats Alex Pereira and then doesn't fight the rest of the year, that's really not enough to make him Fighter of the Year. But if by some chance, guys, he gets the DDP fight, and if not Alex Pereira, like another fight at light heavyweight, like makes moves towards 205. I'm going wild. I think this man just needs to fight twice. He just needs to fight twice. Like I said, every time he gets in there, it captures your imagination. So give me Khamzat Chimaev as my pick for potential 2025 Fighter of the Year.
All right, Casey,
I like it.
what say you?
I want to be on brand and just say Manel Kopp. Manel Kopp's taking this year.
Oh, wow.
I love Pantoja, but he had his run. It's Manel Kopp's year. He showed up. This is it. He's going to make weight 2 times, beat Pantoja, and beat Pantoja in the rematch. But I'm actually going to go with Shavkat Rakhmonov.
Ooh.
He will come back from his MCL injury or whatever. He will beat Bilal, and then he will be who would be next up after Bilal?
I don't know if there's a
Joaquin Buckley, baby.
Oh, that's right.
Yes.
Top 5 Fighter of the Year, Joaquin Buckley.
Yeah, so he'll go 2-0, and it'll be a great matchup. But I'm going Shavkat. I think he will be my Fighter of the Year in 2025.
And then we head on over to Atlanta, Georgia, Jed Meshew. Who you got?
So I made a list. I'm going to very quickly go through my top 5 with a shout out to Alex Pereira, who was number 6. Not because I think he's going to have a big year, but because the last 4 years, if you just picked Alex Pereira, you had a decent chance of being really close to correct. So maybe that magic run keeps on going for Poatan. My number 5 Fighter of the Year for 2025, Umar Nurmagomedov. We know that 311, he is fighting. I believe he's going to win the belt against Merab Dvalishvili. He will get 1 more title defense. If he gets 2 more, whoo, buddy, we're cooking there. Number 5 is Umar for me. Number 4, I got to also be on brand. Valentina Shevchenko, she is going to defend against Manon Fiorot at some point next year. If she gets another one, and maybe, guys, just maybe that other one is, oh, I beat Manon. Aaron Blanchfield's got other. There's not a clear-cut next contender because everybody else has kind of lost to Manon before this. Maybe Valentina says, okay, Kayla Harrison is the bantamweight champion. Amanda Nunes, she's not quite ready to come out of retirement. Let me go and get my second belt. She beats Kayla Harrison, Fighter of the Year, Valentina Shevchenko. Number 3, Islam Makhachev. I think he's going to beat Arman Tsarukyan, though that fight is obviously very dangerous at 311. And then I believe he probably gets a welterweight fight later in the year, depending on what happens with Shavkat and Bilal. I don't know if he ends up beating Shavkat, but I mean, we're talking about the pound-for-pound best fighter in the world, including in your top 5 list of possible Fighter of the Year. Seems like a fair bet for me. Number 2, I've told you guys, 2025, I'm going to be optimistic, and I was shocked to hear AK say the name I was thinking. Tatiana Suarez, she is going to make it to a fight, win a title finally by beating Weili Zhang, and then she is going to have an injury-free 2025 and defend the belt twice and out of nowhere. A career we all wrote off. She will be the comeback Fighter of the Year. She will be the champion, the dominant champion. She will win Fighter of the Year. But the number one person, the guy I'm putting all my money on, who I feel the best about, I'm the most on-brand human I've ever been. Guys, when we are here 1 year from now, I am very excited for this show because we will all get together and we will watch Casey Leiden be forced to acknowledge that Dricus du Plessis is a good fighter. He will cry. He will rip his hair out. The sleeves will already be ripped off, and he will be so angry and befuddled to just say, I have to pick him because he beat Sean Strickland and he beat Hamzat Chimaev and he beat whoever the hell else comes up. I still don't get it, but he is the Fighter of the Year, and I cannot wait for that moment when my large idiot son just forces EKC to be like, fine, you're good at fighting.
This is going to be incredible. And then Casey just leaves him off the list.
And Casey be like, what do I do with this guy? What do I do with him?
DDP was my number 6 after that.
If we had a top 6, I would have had him, sure. Yeah. But,
all rules. Right. I accept. 2 things I want to say. 1, if we're talking about being on brand, then you know exactly where I'm going. And number 2, this might be the Manager to the Stars, Daniel Rubenstein's favorite award show of all time, because now we're going to add a third fighter from his stable to the predictions. Because, guys, I don't know if you know this or not, but Arman Tsarukyan is about to become the lightweight champion of the world. And I assume he will have at least one defense of that title, because I'm going with Arman to beat the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, to defeat the unbeatable guy in the best division of the sport, one of the toughest divisions in all of sports. When we come on this show this time next year, Arman Tsarukyan will be the unanimous Fighter of the Year for 2025. Let's go.
Wow.
And that segues perfectly. And yes, how about that?
What a year.
Who would have guessed that I would have picked Arman Tsarukyan?
Couldn't be me. I couldn't have guessed it.
Daniel Rubenstein. Daniel, his powerful, the Dungeon of Doom of MMA could be in 2024. Wow.
DDP, Shavkat, Arman Tsarukyan. He's got Petr Yan. I mean, they just keep coming. They just keep coming. Main event Rubenstein over at Ruby Sports. But this all segues perfectly into what is to come here at MMA Fighting as we enjoy a little breather from UFC action. Of course, more year-end fun. We'll have a lot of prediction content heading into 2025, including just my favorite twofer of the year, the On to the Next One predictions extravaganza. Coming up on the podcast network, AK and I will go through our picks from last year. We'll see what we got right, what we got wrong. And then we'll have the live show the following week where we do our buy-sell questions. So make sure you get in there and submit your buy-sell questions because there's just so many and it's the best. We're going to have Jed and I's BTL promotional and I guess organizational Festivus coming up on the podcast network. So stay tuned for that. So just keep it locked to MMAfighting.com, and shout out to Casey, AK, and Jed. Thank you, gentlemen, very much for joining me to discuss these awards. And to all the viewers, listeners, and readers of MMAfighting.com, we appreciate you so much for sticking with us after all the craziness throughout the year. 2025 is going to be our year. There's no doubt about that. And the biggest reason why is because of all of you supporting us each and every day, each and every show. It means the world to us. So thank you again for that. And thank you for watching the MMA Fighting 2024 award show. Have a fantastic holiday season, a tremendous new year, and we will see you in 2025. It's the year of Arman Sarukian. Bye-bye, everybody.
Love y'all.
M&L Cop.
D.
Rook.
Oh.